Five, four, three, two, one. Broadcast button clicked.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those coming back, welcome back. For those new to our session, welcome. We're really happy to have you here. We've got a great session for you today. This is the last in our series for Health AI University. Really great content today that Chris has put together for you. It's really going to bring things to the practical, talk to you about how to put things into practice, how to ask the right questions, and how to help your organization get started. For those of you, many of you will know Chris, but for those who don't, you're in great hands. There's nobody better to take you through today's session. Chris brings deep experience in multiple areas, everything from hands-on data science and machine learning in Python to deep healthcare experience to digital marketing. So with that, I'm going to get out of the way and turn it right over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for the awesome intro. And happy to flip the script this time around. So I'm taking the reins from Professor Joe on what we're going to get out of today's session. So for those of you who have attended the previous ones, this should all be easy to digest. And for those who haven't, this is all meant to be self-contained. We're going to be releasing all of the sessions at the same time in the Health AI University Toolkit to be able to give you like some of these actionable items here, such as the lens of understanding how healthcare AI applies and what where your role might be within it and how to make decisions around it. So getting from that nebulous concept, that hard to understand AI concept, and really breaking it down to the stuff that makes sense for healthcare leaders who are executing in the field today. So what we are focusing on here is session 4 is how do we evaluate the various options that are available to us? We've actually shared some things around how data scientists make decisions about which models to use and which choices to make. Well, how do we take that knowledge on things like precision, recall, area under the curve, and other aspects, and really, as we're making decisions on how to engage patients, how to structure our outreach, how to transform the way that people are doing business with us and having experiences with us, how do we turn that into something that's actionable for you? So without further ado, here's how we began the session, was with a poll. This is how we began a few weeks ago, which was about everybody's familiarity with healthcare AI and healthcare AI projects. And it actually highlighted the fact that this is really important because a big number of people believe that they'll be making decisions in healthcare AI. When you add on to that, and the vast majority have either made decisions, are making decisions, or even participating in projects. So this is spreading wildly. There's another contingent. The smallest contingent is actively evaluating AI-related solutions. But then the true smallest contingent, we asked this question. We straight up asked, who thought they wouldn't be involved in any kind of healthcare AI related decisions, and they gave the correct answer that that's not the case. If you're making decisions, the way that AI technologies are creeping into various technologies and things like that, eventually the decisions that you make will be on AI related platforms. So to help understand who was successful at making those decisions and who was not, and tease out various characteristics of those people, of those crowds, MIT, Sloan, and Boston Consulting Group got together last year and put together a study on 2,500 different executives and their relationship with AI. Well, the most important thing about what those executives did was whether or not it was successful. And I work for a healthcare AI company, folks. I'm at an AI company saying that 70% of the leaders who invested in it didn't work, didn't get successful. I mean, that's maybe a conflict of interest there. But ultimately, we're trying to figure out what mistakes they made, how to avoid being in that 70% category, and really focus on the gains that these people were categorized as AI leaders and pioneers. We want to focus and tease out the types of decisions, the processes, the way that they framed the challenges that they were addressing. We want to frame out like what's that 30% made of. Now, if you're to slice it, like if you're to find the most important, like one of the most important variables in that, one of the most important things that led to somebody being in that 30% category, it's the way that it's framed in terms of strategy, the way that the AI relates to Do we look at it as another technology, another set of software tools, or do we look at it as a way to expand our strategy or expand our ability to meet our strategic objectives? I'm going to read it out loud. I never read slides except until today. AI is not a separate agenda. It is a subset of tooling and capabilities that we're using to pursue our strategic objectives. That's the most important part. Thank you, Werner Boeing, CIO, Roche Diagnostics. So the next question then is, well, actually, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit and just share something that Joe shared at the beginning, which was how do we establish the types of AI decisions that we want to make? Well, I'm gonna start all the way over at the conclusion. What's the strategic objective? And from that strategic objective, we start identifying, okay, so what kind of predictions do we need to make? What kind of actions do people need to be able to take? And then it's a question of what kind of data sources, software technologies to enable that action. We're not going to lead with this. The idea is to first start with our strategic objectives, just like the pioneers and leaders did, and work backwards, filling in those gaps to what meets those objectives. So then the next question, and Joe is actually going to throw a poll up for us, but what types of opportunities did the most successful leaders pursue? Was it we're going to automate processes and decrease FTEs in this particular department? Or was it more focused on growing revenue, improving utilization? I'm going to not give too long for the answers to roll in.
So I see responses coming in. We've got 3 folks who've already voted. Now we're up to 4.
When we hit 5, I'm just going to go with it. So whoever's holding out, let's just release that knowledge to the world. But long story short, so I see a good split between revenue growth measures and cost cutting measures. This is actually how it rolled out. And the majority of the answers were around revenue growth measures. So congrats, give yourself a pat on the back if that was you. But yeah, 72% success rate when we're thinking about, well, how do we change the way that people do business? How do we change the way that they transact and interact with us? How do we use these technologies to grow that perspective versus looking for various cost-cutting measures using AI? That hits on a sensitive subject, I know, because a lot of people look at this in terms of, hey, like, is my job going to be automated in the short term and things like that. But of the solutions that that I've seen that we're focused on, there hasn't been any kind of replacement. It's not smart enough to replace a fully functioning employee. It's more about like they say, artificial intelligence. They say the focus is on assisting with the role, assistive intelligence, if you will. So we've covered the type of opportunities are focused on growing the business, but what are the threats that AI poses? In the MIT Sloan/BCG study, they identified existing competitors and new entrants, but we wanted to add a third one, which is the potential that the AI algorithms, since they're using historical data to make decisions, then they could reinforce the bias from those decisions. Because we want to emphasize that while especially for people in healthcare, especially that healthcare has a higher calling, some of the questions about the solutions that you're looking at should be around are we asking questions about how different campaigns or outreach suggested might be discriminatory or disadvantage certain groups? Because on the flip side, there's an opportunity to turn that historical bias around. New entrants. These are organizations. They might be newer. They're not saddled by all the technical burdens and technical debt from institutions of old, so that enables them to start fresh with newer and more convenient experiences that might not be as easily or quickly accessible to companies that have huge amounts of existing and entrenched systems that were developed in the 80s. Again, and another one is as existing players, as existing market forces do start adapting those technologies, then the ones who start doing that earlier, the ones who get to that place earlier, then more solidly put their position in the competitive landscape. So AI as a threat, if your organization is the one that's advancing and moving forward on it, then I guess you become the threat. So exploring, since we're mainly focused on the engagement use cases that we've seen, like the use cases around patient engagement, I really like Greystone's annual digital marketing and healthcare report. They put that out every January/February of each year. Good thing to just latch onto early to see what your peers are doing with their AI use case, with AI use cases, or even data-driven use cases. I like to bring this up because it emphasizes that, hey, since 2009, since the advent, the popularity of EMRs, we've gotten more data-driven. But when we're thinking about things like list pulls and specific reports and campaign management, that's really focused on features and functionality and technology. But where we're trying to really move the thinking is from software and into business transformation. And I like to use this as an example that, hey, the big promise was EMRs are coming. And what they're going to do is they're going to transform the patient experience to where there's predictive and adaptive experiences. There's evidence-based medicine at all, well, not just evidence-based medicine, but moving all the way to personalized medicine, outreach, and things like that. The Amazon experience would be fully baked in healthcare, but it wasn't quite there yet. The EMR wasn't quite enough. So what if we take all these different, so if one piece of software isn't the answer, what if exchanging data between those pieces of software is the answer? Because there's companies like Experian that track people's activity out in the market as they swipe their credit cards. There's population health data that comes from insurance companies and various others, call center interactions, the interactions that we have and track from marketing perspective. So what if we take all that and put it into one place, call it a patient 360, then will we get a proper patient experience? Not necessarily, because even though you have all that data in place, there's always the question of what can we do with it? What's the action that we want to take? So data itself isn't enough. But when we start looking at and intelligently going through how we can use that data to prioritize and personalize interactions, then we start looking at, start getting to the business level transformations that we're focused on. So just some examples. I actually stole this from our presentation with Ryan Younger yesterday at Virtua Health, but just some examples of, hey, if we get out of data and down into strategy, then we start developing value from AI. So I'd look at going from those feature-driven use cases to more strategic use cases. Another theft from our presentation from Virtua yesterday, but this is a particular algorithm that identified people who should be targeted for mammograms, who had risk for breast cancer. So thinking about service lines strategically, where those people are, various characteristics, and targeting outreach that way. Another example is being able to identify a patient's risk to churn. It's too late to wait 18 months or 24 months to start engaging in interactions and considering people new patients when the patients that are in your population are somebody else's new patients that they're going after aggressively as well. So identifying where's the churn risk potential and what are the interventions and steps that we need to make sure that we're retaining those patients. And then, of course, we saw that giant amount of data, those thousands of data points that would be generated by all those sources. Well, if we distill it all the way down to something that's actionable, that helps people drive the next best step in their patient experience, then that's another great way to think about AI strategically. But we know that there's all kinds of promises that all kinds of vendors and potential partners are able to make, but not quite as able to prove. So typically there's an evaluation process, and that will have like pages and pages and pages of questions about specific features and functions and things like that, which has its place. You have to know that there's a baseline functionality there. But there's other ways that we want to propose that you evaluate these platforms and understand how to make decisions. So we want to jump away from this being the key focus. What are the features and functionality? Because there's a tendency, like a lot of people can just answer yes to everything, and we want to get away from that and really think about how we are transforming the business. So there's 5 key components that I'm going to go over for the rest of the presentation. We're going to start with exactly where those leaders start is what is the strategic KPI that we're trying to track. Any solution is a non-starter if there's a goal that you have that can't be reasonably measured by that system or by some other system that you have. So if we're starting from strategy, then it's a non-starter if it's something that we can't track. So that's the first focus. The second focus, well, it's also a non-starter if people aren't using it, if they're not adapting to it, because if we're talking about business transformation here, if we're talking about new capabilities and information being gained, and also the fact that that information is not valuable unless there's action around it, how are organizations driving that action around it? So now that we've covered kind of the business aspects, there is that part that a lot of people call technical, the data management component of, can it get up and running and will it be reliable? So we'll talk about some thinking behind how to tease that out. And Joe teased this last week, well, actually the last 2 weeks, but model visibility and performance. We're in healthcare, and we can't have a black box approach where we don't understand how these models work and how they're making decisions about how they're interacting with people at the time of their highest and most critical need. So we'll talk about how those, we'll being able to ask the right questions and peer in to how those decisions are made. And we'll finish off with thinking around data ethics and equity, which I actually think is a big opportunity. But so long as leaders understand what the implications are and start asking the right questions around it. So we want to use this as a stake in the ground to start doing that. Now, this is a lot of stuff, right? I have 14. I have 14 minutes left. So to help you actually be able to put this stuff in action, I'm going to also talk about some a toolkit that we'll be coming out with pretty soon that's going to have like this thinking, the thinking that we're going to go over built in for your own evaluations. So the question, what features and functionality do vendors have versus what can this team do to help us transform our business? We're going to start with those strategic KPIs. The thinking here is like a lot of systems, a lot of point solutions. They have reports they're easy for them to make, like anything that's happening within the system. Like of course, if I have a blogging software, then I can report on how many blog posts are being made and use that as a KPI and a metric. But the problem with that is when it gets to that strategic level, they probably appreciate the fact that there's so much work and effort going into it, but it doesn't impact their strategic goals. So the question is, the first question that we should be asking is, how do we know that a certain platform can track with our strategic goals? So in this case, we have to take a show, not tell approach. Like we have to push our partners, push our vendors, ask the tough questions, build out the tough scenarios where they have to demonstrate that reporting is online in a kind of real-time manner, online accessible with consistent results and consistent metrics, versus the kinds of cherry picking. I apologize to anybody on Microsoft here. I'm not picking on Excel or PowerPoint. I'm picking on the concept of reports that are one-offs that are not consistent. So the reporting has to be online. And then one way to start teasing out whether or not the integration and attribution that was promised to you actually exists is to start looking at reports that show reports that might incorporate elements of marketing automation in combination with downstream clinical revenue attribution. That stuff has to be visible and seen. And then your strategic goals are going to be changing over time. Your long-term partnership has to be able to be a long-term partnership. So another thing to ask to demonstrate is not only, hey, I see these canned reports that you developed. I see that early on you put something together that I could look at, but how easy is it? How much of a lift is it going to be when our strategic initiatives change and we need to start tracking different measures and KPIs? So part of that plan needs to include a demonstration where you see reports, dashboards, things like that being modified live. Now, I made this point really big because it's another big challenge is, do you have the keys? Do you own this data? Or is it something that exists on somebody else's platform? And as you terminate with them, you don't have access to it to enhance future operations. So a demonstration of being able to extract data from the system without having to go to through a go-between is critical when it comes to your data ownership and your experience with that vendor. And see, I didn't fully knock on Excel also because like sometimes there will be reports that you'd want to pull from the system and then send to another team to run in a different way. So Microsoft, I'm sorry. The next part, change management. This is tough because it involves questions about who the people are, who the people you're going to be allied with are. So outside of that, before any kind of evaluation, some things to look for are some like just white papers. What are they putting out as far as suggestions for best practices? How are they tracking that stuff? Are they giving you a data-driven way? Does it seem like their team operates in a data-driven way when it comes to identifying best practices for the engagement metrics that you're trying to meet? Thought leadership videos. I mean, here we are, right? Just kidding. But some of these things aren't going to be out there on the internet for you to easily access. So things to ask for would be, hey, what are your internal practices? Does that align with the way that we do business, our strategy? When it comes to some of the KPIs that we've targeted, growing bariatric service lines or reaching out from an oncology perspective, have you outlined the playbooks that are going to help us be able to make the right decisions on the type of content that we use, on when to use the right type of content to engage people in very sensitive situations? Does that stuff exist? So various things to ask for, benchmarking methods, how you compare clients with others, things like that that you'd want to know. And of course, structured interviews with clients. Absolutely best when those clients are kind of matched with your organization in terms of size, buying power, strategic initiatives, and things like that. That's absolutely the best scenario that you can be with. But also another thing is you don't want to take it completely from the sales team. So being able to meet team members and have interviews with them, understand where they're coming from, what accomplishments they're proud of, and their professional interest. It's very important to know if their team is kind of an extension in philosophy and goals to yours. Data management. So this is a really tough nut to crack, and Harvard Business Review would confirm that. With these types of data-driven initiatives, we saw the 70% failure rate that MIT Sloan discussed. Harvard Business Review said up to 69% failure rate, and a big portion of that is having all those data sources. You saw it in that patient 360. Some of people's eyes might have been boiling over, but yes, it's a challenge to bring all those data sources together. So typically the response has been to ask, but what is everybody going to say when you ask a question about, can you integrate with our systems? Yeah, they're going to say that. Yes. How long does it say? Oh, we're the fastest. Is it reliable? All the time, 99.9999%. Is it real time? Yes. Real time all the way down to the week, or real time all the way down to the quarter? Yes. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. So how do we get beyond that? How do we start seeing beyond that asterisk? Another example of show, not tell. Live data fusion examples, that's really close to that KPI example that I brought up earlier, which is to see if there's live online reporting that incorporates outreach and clinical elements at the same time. So important to hold them to that and like get a live view of that. Also, as far as data ingestion, this to get at least a little bit of a picture of the story. Can we take a CSV? Can we take a Excel file and ingest that into the platform? What are some of the specifications and ramifications around that? Because we don't want to be stuck in a scenario where there's weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of iteration before we can start getting any value from a platform. Some other things are harder to show. So there does have to be some discovery and discussion around that. So in our guide, we'll talk about the types of things to look out for when asking questions. Like a lot of these things are inevitable. So hey, here's a picture of what an ideal data workflow might look like. And you have to ask questions around what happens in these cases of messy data, missing data, system failures, and error handling. No system's perfect. And if you don't get a clear perspective on what happens in these kind of inevitable situations, then the ramp up time might be much longer than is promised. AI models, same concept. So we introduced some terminology, we introduced some thinking last week with things like precision, recall, area under the curve. This helps us get beyond these questions that you're always going to get a yes answer to. So Are your AI models accurate? Yeah, they're accurate. How many models do you have in production? Every single model. Are they effective? Yeah. Are they up to date? Always. So the types of questions that we can start asking, we're taking this from the breast cancer model example. So what kind of data was the model trained on? The reason to ask a question like that is because you want to see how many patients were involved, what kind of information was used, and most importantly, what targets were used, what codes were potentially used to identify these targets, because that starts answering the question is this model, is it chasing after is it training on data that's going to be valuable to the target metric that we're going for? Whatever model is trained on is going to be what it targets. So it has to be trained on the right things and with the right data. So just understanding at a base level what kind of data was used is a big help in getting beyond just a vague question of is it accurate? Show me model performance. Again, is it accurate? I'm beating up on that question, but show me the model performance. You're armed now with terminology and tools around that area under the curve. The beauty of this metric, I mean, it's not a perfect metric, but the beauty of it is that you can use it at a high level to compare multiple models. It's always going to be a value between between 0 and 1, and you can start comparing, oh, well, this approach performed at 0.85 AUC, whereas this other approach performed at 0.67 AUC. So we would assume that it's likely that the 0.85 one is going to produce do a better job producing the results that we want. Other questions we can ask is, well, hey, of the people that are targeted, what's the improvement in likelihood that they fall into that category that we're trying to track? But it's the idea is just getting ahead of the concept of, is it accurate? How many do you have in production? The stuff that people can easily just say yes to. And how does the model decide? That goes hand in hand with the training data that was used. You're going to get questions oftentimes, especially if your models require clinical validation. You need to bring other people in to make these decisions. They're going to want to know what kind what was the most important features that were used in this model. Was it their hemoglobin? Was it their BMI? Like they have, like, they've read PubMed, and they're constantly involved in these decisions, and they're going to want to validate that the data scientists and whoever the clinical validation team, which is something else you should also be asking, is how are these models clinically validated? But they're going to want to know that the right work was done to remove any kind of spurious correlations. Early on, we brought up the ethical challenges and ethical considerations. We brought this up in the first session, but just a recap, we focused on an algorithm that was used to identify people's likelihood to commit crimes again after being released. And it was unfairly targeting Black people, saying that they were twice as likely to recommit as white defendants. We talked about the gender bias that was brought out that was made apparent in Apple's credit algorithm. And we even talked about how in healthcare there's been extensive testing around these algorithms and discovery around racial bias. I believe that a lot of this stuff, like, everybody on this call, I hope, is extremely well-meaning and they want to do the right thing, but we're not equipped to do the right thing if we're not asking the right questions. So again, this is, we want to get away from kind of pushing this issue under the rug and really holding companies, holding technology accountable to start asking these questions and making sure that they're not embedding bias, the bias that we all want to get rid of, embedding that bias back into the system. So to sum that all up, to wrap everything up, I know that I've covered a lot. I've said all this in one breath. I haven't inhaled yet. I just did it all in one breath. So I apologize if I speak too fast, but there's a lot going in here. But what we're going to do is we're going to put this equipment in your hands. You've seen guides that go over definitions of some of these terms. The interactive guide that Joe awesomely put together that lets you kind of see how data scientists determine, like, whether or not a model is accurate, and then how accurate is the accuracy. Like, it goes deep. So you've seen that. We're going to wrap it all up with this toolkit that's going to have all of these videos and all of the tools that we've made available, including an RFP design template, so that you can start baking those evaluation type questions in, baking those into your evaluation, so that, you know, you're holding vendors and tech partners accountable and making sure that you're able to get the best results for your population. So all of that we're making available for free. With that, I know, well, we're at time. I haven't seen any questions pop in, but the main thing, well, Joe, I don't know if you had any final words, but I just want to say that it's been really exciting seeing everybody come in and stay engaged with this kind of stuff. I mean, when we're deep into talking about statistics and things like that all the time, it can get a little bit lonely. So we appreciate you coming in and sharing in this knowledge, and we hope that it can help you in the decisions that you're going to make.
Yeah,
Joe,
Chris. Yeah, Chris, fantastic job on today's session. This is really valuable content for the audience, really bringing it to make it practical. So fantastic work on that. It was super fun working with you on the whole session. I hope people got a lot out of it. We're excited to bring leadership to these big topics in AI and bring it to the industry in a way that's practical, and you can really, find ways to get started without spending an arm and a leg, and with getting quick results. So I hope people got a lot out of it. I know I had a ton of fun working with you on the content.
All right. Well, again, thank you everybody very much. And thank you for everybody who's logged in and stayed with us.